Hey everybody, Will Norton from CloudBolt. I'm a senior director of product marketing with the team. We're back here in San Diego for FinOps X 2024, and we're wrapping up 3 days of a lot of announcements, a lot of exciting news, a lot of great conversations with the community. I'm joined again by Kyle Campos, who is our Chief Product and Technology Officer here at CloudBolt. If you watched last year's recap, he was also here. I'm also going to be meeting with Ryan Wrenn, who is our VP of AI and ML. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Plenty of exciting things have happened in the last few days. So let's dive right in. All right, Kyle, we're back in San Diego. And we just spent, 48 hours on our feet, essentially.
Yeah, I feel that, actually.
It is wild to think that we were here about a year ago in just such a different context. And it's exciting to be back and to be with the community once more. Yep. And always great to kind of catch up with you and decompress and talk about what we saw and kind of where your head's at from the last few days. But I think it's important to kind of put in perspective. It's been a year.
Yep.
And from the time that we were last sitting here having a conversation about FinOps X in 2023 and doing a recap, a lot has changed in the world of CloudBolt. And I think it's important to look back at that, right? I mean, we've come a long way. We have a new brand in the market. So for those who have followed us, I mean, our brand has changed significantly. We have kind of new organizational goals, a new motto, a new tagline, kind of a new rallying cry, if you will, around cloud ROI. But I think most important is we have an entire new product vision. And we've taken even steps into that vision in the past year, and we got an opportunity this week to show a lot of what we've been building to the community. How does that feel?
Felt great. Yeah, it's good to be back. Hopefully last year I didn't wear the same shirt. I didn't.
Yeah, you might have. I don't know.
I think we had a fern or something right here last time. No, I mean, like you mentioned, it's night and day from last year to this year. Where we are as a company, where we are as a product. We set out some pretty ambitious goals and disruption for not only us internally and in terms of how we build, how we deliver, but also the what we build and deliver as it relates to where the FinOps community is, where people are struggling, what we theorized would kind of unlock the next sort of phase of growth and help advance, practitioners through their sort of maturity curve and impact in businesses. And it was exciting to kind of show it at scale. We've been working with individual customers on it, but this was kind of the grand reveal. Really great feedback and reception.
Absolutely.
Everybody was, I think the feedback was super positive on what we've done, and what we saw last year. So I would imagine we were commenting on this in this position last year was all of the friction between the insights and the action, the FinOps personas, the engineering personas, and just how much friction and difficulty and lack of facilitation there was between those two worlds, what the outcomes that FinOps dreamed about and what was actually happening on the ground was night and day. And so, we set out to bring those personas together to actually have a product that facilitated the continuous action of the insights that were coming up through our FinOps platform. And along the way, whole new relaunch the company essentially with a new
exciting
brand.
And busy year.
Oh, by the way, we also did that. So tying in those design elements and new UX patterns and all of that along the way. So it's been a massive year for us. But it's starting to get recognized. The gig own placement. Customer feedback, now community feedback.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a long way of saying it feels good.
It feels great to be back, and it feels great to be back, and almost like we went off to college and we came back, and we, last year we had some great discussions around what we were hearing and seeing. Automation did come up in last year's conversation. Yeah. In a way that was us thinking, kind of poking on, there's a lot of issues and it feels like automation could solve a ton of that. Yeah. And I don't know that it was really alive in the community. You saw it in pockets, and in some conversations you had really good applications of automation and orchestration. And now you kind of flash forward a little bit and you look at the state of FinOps data that was recently reported. And a lot of what you took away last year as a product leader and kind of the visionary for our product was, I think there's different ways we could think about solving some of these problems, right? Mm-hmm. Automation was a big one. We talked a lot about unit economics and value last year. And there's, it feels like a bunch of your roadmap and vision did come from last year's just being with the community. Mm-hmm. And we've made some great traction and continue to do that. Is there validation in this week for a lot of what we have put on paper and into the product initially, and where we're going over the next 2 to 3 quarters? And what, if anything, do you take away as kind of new ways of thinking after the last 48 hours?
Yeah, there's a lot of validation. It's kind of come in phases, I think, which is good. As a product leader, you definitely don't want a year span of thesis and validation. Sure. So, but this was an important sort of inflection point or milestone of that validation. So, the State of FinOps report was, I would say, prior to this conference, another significant form of validation that showed essentially where the community was stuck, right? Yep. Like where progress was just either super high friction or the next problem set that everyone was kind of staring at, like, how are we going to solve this? So felt, ahead of the curve on that, because we had been already building that direction, and that was certainly validating. Now, fast forward a little bit to this event where we're showing it at a larger scale, and now you're like, okay, it's different to be aligned on the problem, but then now getting validation on the approach to solve is a whole nother step forward. So I'm pleased that it was resonating with the community here, which is obviously super important. We already have gotten validation from the engineering personas as well around, okay, now I see how this will, for example, one of customers we've been working with, can this integrate with my CI/CD pipelines to do this action? Yes, it can. Okay, great. Then stream these events into me, and now I can execute this in a multi-stage pipeline, right? And so that's when we were talking about moving from motivation, which was in last year's conference, the dominant theme of how do you motivate engineering, which was prevalent in the State of FinOps data. And we talked about the need to move from motivation to facilitation. And I think now we are engaged in those conversations with customers and now the community to show what the difference is between those modes, right? And what is actually possible. And sometimes for personas in each camp, it's hard to see what that bridge looks like. What could it possibly be? We have our way of working, you have your way of working. And Jira is a very poor bridge between the two. So I think we've paved that bridge, and I'm excited to keep going. Now leaning even more into it. We got good ideas and feedback around, like, well, could you do this? This additional thing, this additional integration with this, this provider, et cetera. So yeah, excited to take the next steps as well.
It is interesting looking back last year at the themes. If you just kind of looked around and jumped into a lot of the conversation, it was a lot around that awkward phase of, okay, we have maybe executive sponsorship at some level of the business. We're starting to get more headcount and FTEs in the FinOps space. But to your point, it was a lot of, hey, how do we get the rest of the company to kind of understand what is FinOps, the definition, and how to play nice across the aisles. We had a piece of research that was launched right before last year's FinOps X that spoke a lot to that. Just as you go reach out to non-FinOps personas, what is their perception of FinOps?
Yeah.
And it was largely kind of all over the map. You had some people that didn't believe in it. You had some folks that were maybe warming up to it. We just released another study that looked at it in a different way. And largely what we found is this last year, the FinOps community has made leaps and bounds. They've had a lot of traction in that way around getting the rest of the organization to understand what is FinOps and adopt it. And people are bought in now.
Yeah.
And that's what we're hearing and seeing. And so to your point, it's kind of shifted, the problems that have kind of shifted to, okay, everybody knows what this is, everybody's willing to participate. Now, how do we scale and do that as the technology continues to grow at light speed? AI was a huge topic this week. It almost felt like its own track in a lot of ways. And maybe there was a couple conversations last year. I would say there was 10 or more this year. What were some of the takeaways from what you sat in and what you heard related to AI?
Yeah, so I mean, from all the, the big three cloud providers that had their product announcements, they all had similar capabilities in this regards to sort of conversational exploration of the data, which is, I think, resonant with part of our vision, which is simplifying the user experience for what is an increasingly more complex ecosystem. Focus is great, but it's also bringing together a lot more diverse data sets. That means there's, in some sense, simplified because it's normalized, but in another sense, it is broadening. You start bringing in SaaS data and custom metrics and all these types of things. The business use cases are expanding, right? And so if the personas, if it's not accessible to a broader set of personas, I think the ideals of focus and what it's supposed to accomplish might not ever come to fruition unless it's more accessible. And so I think you saw, some key themes around that, some attempts, right, to make it more accessible and how you interface with that data set. So I think, that was resonant for us. We've talked a lot about that and have been working on similar approaches. I think a lot of the conversation around generative AI was interesting to hear. I think it's pretty clear. It's very early days. There are not great patterns set out there and not even great frameworks to reason about it in the community, in the ecosystem today, where it's appropriate, how engineering's using it, et cetera. I guess my only concern in this regard is that I think it's incumbent on the FinOps community to be really good listeners to the engineering communities that are driving the innovation here, and for existing operational patterns, engineering patterns, delivery patterns in that ecosystem, and how we tie into those as a community. I in one of the sessions I led, there was a little pop poll I did just around tagging, which is like one of the fundamental capabilities in a FinOps context, and just asked who here has an aligned taxonomy between FinOps and engineering, and it was maybe half the room did. And then of that half, how many, collaborated well with engineering to do that? Much shorter percentage, right? And then it was, okay, well, was it finance and or the FinOps, orgs kind of, smashing engineering with some rule set, the other way around? So in any case, you can see how the communication lines there and the sort of how we learn from those personas is still not as mature as it needs to be. So there's a danger. There's a danger of trying to impress upon another persona some like rigid
Framework
policy
or
set, or like,
something,
hey,
yeah.
we did this all in this silo. Here's what you're going to get, and it just is.
It doesn't scale.
It's not going to align well at all. So, I think this is a good example. I think the other, talk track that this kind of dovetails with me on. There's a lot of mention in keynotes around predictability. And I think in general, if you zoom out, and whether it's Gen AI or anything else, the risk item, the reason why it brings it to the FinOps community's attention is because of the lack of predictability, right? And so it surfaces as a business risk. And I think in some sense, I empathize and agree with that, whereas a threshold of predictability in cloud spend is certainly important for us. What I think is the unhealthy view of that is that it should be 100% predictable. And this is the sort of healthy tension lines of any business that needs to innovate. Is there's a threshold of predictability we want to keep strong that should be in that range, and then there's a threshold that we need to be very highly adaptable and responsive and flexible in, because that's our innovation vehicle, and they need to go explore. This is the power of cloud services. Go explore, experiment, learn,
kick the tires,
adapt.
Yep.
And that's the space we are in Gen AI. There isn't rigid patterns yet. It's not highly explainable and well understood around cost implications, other than it's going to be expensive, generally understood.
Yeah, I mean, most organizations are building the plane as they fly it with AI.
Yeah, and that's and I think the muscle that us, and certainly in the vendor ecosystem, we got to help support, but also in the community, is to say the value of the FinOps discipline in that mode is how quickly models can adapt to the learning, right? Where it was, this cost spike, whatever, 300% this month in a whole new way than we've seen. Let's learn what we can about that spike, readapt our prediction models essentially against that learning, and now we've kind of brought that divergence down again, and then we're ready for the next keep learning tuning. Cycle, right? But to try and outside in, constrain all of that, I think ultimately is not going to move the business levers that FinOps should want to accelerate and enable.
There's only so much time and attention, right? So, a couple more things that struck me. There's a lot more vendors in the room this year. Last year we were one of many. You look to your left and your right, and there's many tools that were in this ecosystem. That's grown, and in a lot of ways, it's grown because there's vendors now that are solving very specific challenges. I know a topic of conversation that we've had with our customers, and on the product side is really, to date, there's been this broad set of solutions that are skin deep approach, or there's an approach where we can, vendors go out and they try to solve something very specific, one pain point or a set of pain points in a very deep way.
Yeah.
In the last, couple quarters, you've announced that we're going to be taking kind of a technology partnership ecosystem approach to our platform. I'd just love for you to talk a little bit about that, and you got a chance to kind of go look at some of the newer players in the room and have conversations. What excites you, and where are we going next?
So I think that the tech partnership ecosystem is really important for this entire community and the customers to benefit most. When you see a lot of vendors, and Mike Fuller was talking about this from his build versus buy talk track, his session around how sort of patchwork it is. It's, I think the average is a little over 4 tools, FinOps tooling, however that's defined per customer. And the broader your tech landscape is, as far as certainly cloud providers, but even technology sets inside of those cloud providers, whether it's Kubernetes or you're into you got big data footprints and data streaming and all these. There's very specialized technology sets that have their own scale patterns, specialized scale patterns, have their own sort of operational envelopes for what might be waste and what's efficient, what the efficiency model looks like. They're all highly specialized. And in order for us as a vendor to take care of our customer need, want to be able to bring as much value, get their cloud ROI as high as possible, as fast as possible, whether that means we have natively built the answer, to address any particular area of waste, or we partner with another solution, another vendor that has deep expertise in a particular narrow lane that we want to bring in and surface through our tooling. Either way, our customer is getting the value. And so it was great. Another form of great feedback we've had here is we were talking with other vendors here. There's a lot of openness to that and a lot of willingness to work together on that, which I think ultimately benefits all of us as vendors, but also, and more importantly, benefits the customer as well.
Allows us to be flexible, but still powerful in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
We were joined this week by StormForge.
Absolutely.
They were at our booth, and it was great to show now natively we have StormForge's kind of Kubernetes optimization, automation, and management tooling directly in our platform, and going from just our experience and not having to necessarily leave it, directly bring and show the insights and the capabilities of StormForge in that environment. There was a lot of kind of eyes widening when customers saw that, because it was us saying, hey, we could spend 2 years of our own engineering time trying to do something like this in our platform, or we can go find the best in breed, really smart minds, and bring that value to you if you need it. And at the same time, you're looking around the room and listening to some of the discussions that are happening, and you're going, there's more and more problems every week, month, and year in this space. You can't solve it all. And I think that's why, potentially a big reason why so many organizations went, we just try to solve this ourselves, because we can't just keep buying a bunch of solutions, right? And so I think customers, especially in prospects, were very perceptive, and they were like, this is a good idea. Just, trying to bring as much as you can, optionality-wise, into a single umbrella. Yeah,
I mean, it's been great response. You mentioned StormForge with the Kubernetes optimization, even with our current customer base, to go from, a light monitoring of that spend and visibility of it, to now we can impact and save you a lot of your monthly, run rate on that spend. In a very accelerated fashion.
Right.
I mean, that was warmly met. I think, even in the hallways here, we've had customers bring to us ideas about like, hey, it'd be great if you could also surface this, whether they're doing, they have a big data platform. They don't know how to really optimize for it, right? It's specialized. Hey, we heard about this one, maybe it's a niche player. If you could partner with them and bring that goodness to us. So I'm excited to kind of start adding to that ecosystem. We got a few more that we're conversing with now, and with a few more customers that are kind of pulling on us in a good way. So I think that's only going to expand opportunity for us and value for our customers.
There's one final topic, of course, I have to bring up. It'd be not a conversation about FinOps X in 2024 if we didn't talk about Focus. Last year when we spoke, Focus was kind of early stages. And since then, you are now on the governing board of FinOps, very, very closely involved with the Focus project. And we've just recently announced that we are Focus certified,
Yep.
along with some of the other certifications we have from FinOps on our platform. Talk to us about what you're most excited to see and hear in the world of Focus in the last couple of days, and I think you have a peek behind the curtain as to where it's going as well. What were your thoughts? It felt like it was almost everywhere here.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that this time last year it was not a forgotten conclusion that we would be at this moment with GA with four, counting Oracle. We joked that there's an IBM rep silently weeping in the corner, not being included in as a major cloud provider. But in any case, AWS wasn't in yet.
We commented on that. There was the silence was deafening last year from AWS.
And I remember, last year when I was pushing, like, we have to build for this. We have to place a bet here. That I remember getting questions about, like, well, is AWS in? And I'm like,
they're gonna have to be.
It'll come, right?
There's enough pressure.
It'll come. But there was a risk it didn't happen.
Sure. And
that we would be having a whole different conversation at this point if those three didn't come together on this. So getting to GA maybe took a little bit, longer than originally hoped and aspired towards, but we're here now. It's a great milestone. We're starting to talk about what's in 1.1 next here. And for us, it's also a little bit of a sigh of relief because that we were planning and building with the trust and hope that this would happen.
Together,
yeah, it was all come together. It would have been trouble without that. So that's great. So we can't forget that there's a lot of hard work. The contributors on that we owe gratitude towards to pushing this project forward. Everyone is going to benefit from that. For us, we have an interesting take on this. We've been building our own custom collectors for a while for our customers in PaaS ecosystems, private cloud contexts as well. So we've been building ahead and around this, knowing it's coming, and our mode of normalizing all of that different data is now a much safer road ahead for us. So for us, it just keeps accelerating us towards, we placed a bet and built ahead a bit, and now it's paying off. And now it's going to start paying off for us. So I know there's a subset of us that that announced on that, but I'm really, really pleased that the bet we placed paid off, and now we have a data platform built for the future that our velocity for product capabilities can just keep ramping up.
Well, it's a good segue to my next conversation. I'm talking with Ryan Wrenn, who is our VP of AI/ML, newer addition to the company, and he's kind of led some of the efforts of getting us in that data layer ready to go. So, Kyle, I'm excited for the next year. We've done a lot. We're going to continue to do a lot. The community's done a lot. They're going to continue to do a lot. And
we're going to bring that fern back for next year.
We're going to bring the fern back, and but we will be here next year, and we will do the same. So good to see you again.
Yeah.
I'll bring Ryan on next.
Beautiful. Thanks. Cheers.
All right. So now I'm joined by Ryan Wrenn. Ryan Wrenn is our VP of AI/ML and leads a lot of our engineering and product efforts here at CloudBolt. Ryan, you were not with us last year when we had this conversation. So this is your first FinOps X.
It was, first FinOps X.
How did it go? What were some of your takeaways? What did you enjoy? And what are you kind of leaving with?
Yeah, well, it was exciting. There's definitely a lot going on. We saw the three largest cloud providers all get on stage together and then follow it up with big product announcements at the end. So certainly a lot of momentum in the community, a lot of excitement, and challenges. I think we saw both solutions offered and new challenges emerge. So the announcement of 1.0 of the Focus spec going GA was exciting as kind of a solution to something that I understand was talked about last year as a challenge. And this year, it really seems like AI is the big challenge for the community as a whole, both how to do FinOps for AI, and then how to use AI for FinOps.
You have been with CloudBolt for about 6 months now, and a little over 6 months. And I imagine the first kind of pile of papers that was put in front of you by Kyle was, hey, you got to look at this focus specification, and we got to figure out how do we take a look at our kind of current data setup and rethink that and reimagine it for the future of where we're going with our product. It's got to be very exciting to now have it publicly available, and having all the cloud providers announcing this week, we are ready. I shouldn't say all, 3 of the 4, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. But do you want to talk a little bit about where our data platform has come over the last few months? And we recently had some announcements I'd love for you to kind of share for those who maybe haven't heard.
Sure, yeah. So, we were early adopters of Focus. That was really one of the visions that Kyle set out when I joined, was that, we really needed to adopt an open standard. We needed to engage with the community. And by doing that, it would then open us up to, additional feature functionality and value that we could provide to our customers. And so, being an early adopter, we were going through the pre-release versions of Focus. We had some contributions to the project, and it's exciting, now with it announced, for really there to be this understanding and that, this thing is real. And not only is CloudBolt talking about it, but Amazon's talking about it, Google's talking about it, AWS is talking about it, AWS, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, as well as Oracle. So, we're just seeing that, momentum and adoption grow. And it was exciting to be kind of on the leading edge of that, and excited about the feature functionality that we're going to be able to build off of that standard representation. So as you alluded to, I think we announced a couple weeks ago, the launch of our own data platform. And as we're talking about, Focus was really a central pillar of the architecture of that. We wanted to adopt that. We will track it as it goes on, and we're excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, and just as soon as we're talking about 1.0, now we're talking about 1.1, and there's a roadmap for 1.2, and it's all just very exciting. So having that baseline ready and in our platform opens up a lot of doors, but obviously we've got much more in store with our data platform, not only just as Focus advances, but some crafty things we're thinking about.
That's right, yeah. We have some extensions and some additional things that we're going to try out, and we're excited to engage with our own customers to see if the value that we anticipate is there, and work on and iterate with our customers about where we can make those extensions, and then we can contribute back to the community, and see that not only impact our customers directly, but impact the customers of all of these clouds.
This year, I know you weren't here last year, but this year it felt like there was some tracks of conversations and of content and breakouts. One of those tracks was Focus. There's a lot of conversation around Focus from cloud providers and from practitioners and organizations who have adopted it early. But then the other track I would say that was very clear was this track around AI. And it's interesting in our space, we're looking and thinking about AI in really 2 different ways. And the quote that we kind of have picked up and used is there's AI for FinOps, and then there's FinOps for AI. I know you spent a lot of time this week, obviously makes a ton of sense for what you do in these AI tracks. What are some of the things you took away? What's missing from the conversation, and what are just your overall takes?
Sure, yeah. I think that the community, rightly so, sees this as a challenge and an opportunity. It's a challenge in terms of how do you do FinOps for AI? It is a rapidly advancing field. There's new services, new models, new capabilities coming out, seemingly week after week. The prices and structures of those things are dynamic as the market, evolves with new capabilities. And, I think that what I heard is that a lot of the community is really seeing a lot of parallels to early cloud adoption, where they know they need to do it. They know they need to engage with these technologies, but it's unclear exactly how the FinOps practice can best be applied to them. And so there was a lot of interesting conversation, interesting to see kind of where it goes. I think there's definitely consensus that it's an area that the community needs to work together and work with the cloud providers and with vendors to try to rationalize and figure out how we're going to approach. So that's on the FinOps for AI side. And then on the AI for FinOps, we saw Google, AWS, and Azure all essentially release chatbot functionality and AI augmented capabilities for their native cost tools. It'll be interesting to see how those work as those come into GA, and to see what the adoption looks like, to see what the value customers get from them. I know this is an area that we have done a lot of research and engagement ourselves in, and so we're excited to see how those capabilities are received by the community.
It's never lost on us, and we've talked a lot about our product vision, that AI can be fairly transformational in our space, and really what we're dealing with in the world of FinOps is just big data problems, right? And AI machine learning can be a big tool to solve some of those things. But at the same time, we also, as developers of a product, have to manage the cost on our back end, right? Mm-hmm. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on where you're looking to invest first and where you're poking around, and you're playing that dual role of you're having to build AI to solve these challenges, but also in a cost-effective and efficient way.
Yep.
Are there any tips or tricks or any ways that we're thinking about it internally to try to find that balance of efficiency and value?
Sure. So I think, for us, we're putting in place an MLOps flow that allows us to then kind of track our usage of these technologies in different parts of that MLOps lifecycle or chain. And that's useful because if you do that, you can then begin to really drive at, what are the costs of specific parts of that AI pipeline, whether that's, training, whether that's, inference, and how those capabilities are built into your product. So if you're thoughtful about how you architect and structure your ML and AI pipelines and usage, then it really can feed nicely into the FinOps models necessary to quantify the value that you're getting out of these technologies.
Seeing a lot of overlap with different parts of the organization and operations. FinOps is slowly encroaching into the sustainability space where there's already operations and ML AI, and it feels like now the practitioner community has to be partners to more and more parts of the IT landscape. Well, Ryan, it was great to have you. I think I'll give you one final question before you go. What are you most excited to take back to the product team and the engineers that we have back home?
That's a great question. Gotta think about that for a second. No, I think what I was really excited about was the community engagement. It was really exciting to see the cloud vendors, come together, and kind of focus being an example of them working together, and then looking at our product vision and what we're building, and how that seems to align very closely with what we're seeing in the community, both in terms of traction and solutions like focus, and in terms of challenges that our customers have as they try to manage these ever more complex cloud estates, as well as new technologies like AI. There's an engaged community with a lot of challenges, and I think that we've got a compelling vision. And so for myself and my teams, it's about how can we innovate in that space to solve problems, and that's that's an exciting thing to do, to know that, as we are pushing the boundaries of innovation, there's a receptive audience that will, be able to adopt these tools, and they'll make meaningful changes within their organizations because they have some challenges that they're struggling with.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. It was great to have you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Cheers.